call this meeting of the Executive Committee to order. Take the roll, please.
Mayor. Here. Benefield.
Here.
Brooks.
Here.
Freitag. Frizzalone.
Here.
Gould.
Here.
Hart.
Here.
Ogalla.
Here.
Staley Ferry. Here. Tumanello. Weigel.
Here.
Winfrey.
Here.
And Eustace.
Here. Can you show Lisa the pledge?
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we got the approval of this. Our business, we want the inspector contract. We're not completed. We're still in negotiations. My hope was that maybe we would be able to finish those for this meeting, but we're appears we're not going to be able to. So I'll entertain a motion to table this. So moved. Second. Moved second. Take the roll, please.
Mayor.
Yes.
Benefield.
Yes.
Brooks.
Yeah.
Freitag. Freitag. Here.
Yes.
Frizzalone.
Yes.
Gould.
Yes.
Hart. Here. Ogalla.
Yes.
Staley Ferry.
Yes.
Tumanello.
Yes.
Weigel.
Yes.
Winfrey.
Yes.
And Eustace.
Yes. Next is the amending of the county board rules regarding the request for state's attorney opinion. Mary, I know it's not here. Is Phil there?
Yes.
Hey, Phil, you want to touch on that?
Yeah,
This was just really so we could streamline the system so we can keep better track. Go ahead, Phil.
yeah, he asked to have this done so there's some type of tracking that we formally know what's requested in writing so we can formally just answer that question. Still doesn't prevent you from asking us informal stuff, driving us in the hall and saying, what's, can you help me out on this thing? We just thought it would be nice to have it in the rules so everybody knows where everybody stands on it, and that was it.
Yeah, there's one other change in the rules since we were doing them, and that is, so currently, if there's a special meeting, we have to notify everyone by mail, which or courier, or how we get it to you, but it has to be in a document that's delivered to your home, letting you know of the special meeting. In the rules, we're going to change that you'd be notified by email. And this will make it a lot more efficient. And many of you may not have had this happen to you, but I've had knocks on my door at 1 o'clock in the morning with a courier or a sheriff, a deputy delivering a package for a special meeting because it has to be delivered personally. So I think this gets us more in the digital world, and a lot of people are getting dragged along into the digital world. So that will also be a change within the rules. So I'll entertain a motion to place the rule changes on the county board agenda next week. Second, all in favor?
Discussion. Just one quick question on changing with the email. I'd like to see the wording of that, just because emails, just like mails being dropped off late at night, emails are not a perfect communication process, and I don't know if we want to make sure that there's some kind of response so that people know that there's notification has been received. Thank you.
It just says to be sent to the email that was provided by the board.
The only thing, I just don't want somebody being held responsible for something they might not have seen. And I don't know how we might address that, but I mean, I agree, some kind of read receipt or somebody sending a response back.
If you weren't home, the courier would drop it on your front step. I mean, it's kind of the same thing. Courier doesn't stand if you answer the door. If you don't answer the door, they just leave it.
Okay, I just want to make sure that nobody's going to be held responsible for.
We're going to hold you responsible. Just so you know.
I appreciate that. I thought that's what the job was anyway.
Okay. Any other questions? You can bring it up at the board meeting.
Maybe we can have some sidebar discussion.
Okay. Did we actually vote?
Yes.
No, we didn't. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Okay. Next, we have a presentation on the water supply. Basically, this is about our underground water. Levels are dropping. You wouldn't think that would be the case, would you? I mean, because of many of our communities go to Michigan water and so forth. So, but our water tables are dropping. And of course, I've always been concerned about our groundwater, period. For years, I worry about the contamination of the source, and it's still something that many Will County communities are dependent on. So hopefully you'll find this interesting. Had a little question after afterward. That's the presentation. So I'm going to hand it over.
So, on behalf of the Will County Land Use Department, I'd like to introduce Walt Kelly, who is the head of the groundwater section at the Illinois State Water Survey. Walt actually made this presentation at the Stormwater Committee in January, and then at the recommendation of Board Member Weigel and Speaker Moustis, he was brought here so that you all can hear this at the Executive Committee. So, Walt Kelly.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you for this opportunity to come speak to you. I do want to acknowledge the Department of Natural Resources, which really helped with the initial funding for a lot of this work. The Water Survey has been involved in water supply planning throughout the state for decades. We've especially tried to focus on northeastern Illinois for obvious reasons. But I want to share some of the recent work that we've been doing that indicates that there's some problems up here. So here I have a few main points I want to make. Hopefully these are the takeaway points from this talk. So the sandstone aquifers, which supply much of the water in this area, withdrawals are becoming unsustainable. And these aquifers will no longer meet total water demands within the next 15 to 25 years. So alternative supplies are going to be necessary. But the sandstone aquifers will continue to be important sources of water, and we need to manage them as well as possible. And finally, this is a regional problem requiring regional solutions, and that's really a key point of this presentation. So this map shows where the communities in the Chicago region get their water from. So you can see the light blue color represents the Lake Michigan allocation, but around the outside of the Chicago region, you can see most of the communities rely upon groundwater, and especially the deep bedrock aquifers. And here we are in Joliet right here. So this is a geological cross-section. I just wanted to show this to kind of give you a feel for what's underneath us and what the problems are. So here's Joliet up here, Shorewood. So this shows the geologic formations that exist beneath us. And these blue layers are the sandstone aquifers. So we actually have two. The shallower one is the St. Peter. When I say shallower, it's still 600 or more feet below the surface in most places. And then the deeper one is called the Ironton Galesville, and that's, thank you, Scott, and that goes down probably about 1,000 feet. And there's an even deeper one called the Mount Simon, but that water is too salty for use as a drinking water source. Now between these aquifers, you see these gray layers, and there are layers where the material is pretty impermeable. So water that falls at the surface here, rainwater falling at the surface, does not recharge into these aquifers. And that water goes into the shallow system, into the glacial deposits. It flows towards streams and lakes and deposits out there. Lake Michigan is also not connected to these aquifers. So the actual source of water into these aquifers is actually coming from pretty far away. So mainly in the Rockford area up into Wisconsin, where these sandstone units get much closer to the surface than they are down here in the Chicago region. And so it takes a long time for this water to reach where we are today. And because the water is recharging from such a distance, it's actually higher altitude, the water's under a lot of pressure. When the first wells were drilled in the Chicago region back in the 1860s, there was so much pressure the water actually floated at the surface. are artesian wells, you may have heard of these. So didn't even need a pump. But we put in thousands of wells since that point. We pulled out a lot of water, and that we've been bleeding off that pressure for 150 years. And this black dotted line shows the level of water from these aquifers back when the first wells were drilled. And this red line represents where the levels are now. So you can see it's been a huge drop, especially in the Joliet region, which I'll show in the next slide. But I also want to point out there's also some geological complexity here. There's a fault zone that's actually running south of the Shorewood-Joliet area. That's really complicating things. It's preventing some of the flow of groundwater from moving to the north. So this is what we call a potentiometric surface, which is basically a groundwater contour level map. So here's Joliet. Here's this fault zone I was just talking about. And what I'm showing here is what we call head, or basically the water level in these sandstone aquifers. In pre-development times, before first well was drilled, these numbers up here would have been 700, 800. Down here would have been like 600. Okay, so the water is kind of flowing from high to low. But since we've been pumping like crazy over the last 150 years, you can see we've made a big, what we call a Kona depression down here, and it's mainly centered around the northeastern Will County area. And you can't see that as numbers, but it's less than 300 feet now below sea level. We measure these as relative to sea level. So we've dropped, 800 feet or more in some areas. That's a lot. Yeah, so and I'm going to show an animation, and Colin's going to have to run it for me, but what's going on here is just showing how things have changed through time. So these are very dynamic systems. This red line represents the withdrawal from the sandstone aquifer with time. This shows the water levels in these aquifers. So you can see this was growing through the 70s and 80s. Actually, one of the cones was centered around Elmhurst up here. But in the 80s, DuPage County and Cook County went off the deep sandstone aquifers for the most part. They went on to Lake Michigan water, and you can see as a result, we started pumping a lot less from these aquifers. And as a result, you can see the aquifers started to recover from the massive pumping we were doing. But now, starting in the mid-90s, we've started to ratchet up the pumping a little bit more, and pumping is now focused down in the region where we are right now. And you can see these cone depressions growing around the Joliet area, and it's continuing to grow. And you can see this fault zone right here, which it seems to be preventing water from flowing from the south to the north, which is another problem here. It's kind of a bad location. And I'll also point out there's a number of industries, as you well know, along the Des Plaines River along here. Most of them rely upon the deep sandstone aquifers, and they're actually in a tight situation themselves. So we need to consider what's going on with the industries as well as the communities. So why are we concerned about desaturation in aquifer? Well, there's several reasons. Obviously, we're losing water, we're losing pressure. So if you go from the old situation, when we first started, we had pumping the water out. As we desaturate the aquifer, the pumps have to work harder, more electricity. Pumps sometimes have to be dropped deeper into the well as the water level drops. Shallower wells, like domestic wells, may start to go dry because they typically don't drill all the way through an aquifer for a domestic well. And so we lose capacity from these wells. We also find dry wells. I believe Joliet drilled a well not too long ago. It turned out to be dry. There's also caving potential. And this is a big concern of ours, where the well starts to pump sand. And that's obviously a problem for the equipment. So, like I said before, if these current practices continue, some community industrial wells will begin going dry within 15 years. But we may have problems, and actually we're having problems already, even though there's still water in the aquifer. So this shows the areas that are actually having problems right now. So this is divided into two aquifers, the shallower St. Peter and the deeper Ironton Galesville. And this shows areas where we're already desaturating the aquifer. So the dark red, that's less than zero, so there's actually already waters dropping below the top of the aquifer. The darker red, we've gotten to within 200 feet. So you can see a large area. Again, it's very much a regional problem. It's not just Will County's problem, but Campbell County, DuPage, King County as well, even up into McHenry County. But even our deeper sandstone aquifer, the Ironton Galesville, we're already seeing some risk going on here, and that's our last line of defense, basically, for the sandstone aquifers. Now, these are static water levels, which means the water levels we measure when the pumps are off. When the pumps are turned on, this is actually more of a problem because the water levels can drop 200 to 300 feet from some of these wells. So placing the pump is a very important parameter here. So just showing some more data, this is what we call a hydrograph, which shows, this particular one shows the amount of head, that's the water level above the top of the aquifer remaining. This was for the Ironton Galesville aquifer for one of the Joliet wells. This well goes back to around 1900, and you can see a nice kind of linear trend. And we just draw that line out, and by 2040 or so, we've compromised our deepest aquifer in this center part of the Kona Depression. Okay, so that was all data that I've shown you, data that we've collected by ourselves or with the help of many municipalities and industries in the area. But we also built a groundwater flow model, which helps us to look at scenarios to help forecast what's going to happen into the future. And I'm going to show you some of the results of that model. So here's what our baseline model looks like running out to 2050. So you can see here's the area where the data already shows there is a problem. The dark red showing complete desaturation of the St. Peter, this is the shallower aquifer, put on up into northern parts of the region. So we can do a lot of different model scenarios with this model. And one example is, well, what happens if we switch Joliet off of the sandstone aquifer, which is something that, of course, they're starting to look to do. Well, that helps, but you can see that doesn't really solve the problem for example, Kendall County. You know, the communities up here, or the industries, they're still going to have a problem, even if Joliet completely goes off the sandstone aquifers. What if we took Kendall County off the aquifers? So you may have heard that Montgomery, Yorkville, and Oswego are looking at switching over to the Fox River, which they may well do. Again, that helps, but that doesn't solve the problem. It's a regional problem. We need regional solutions. We need regional cooperation to get to the bottom of it. So again, my bottom line here is that these all the data and modeling that we've done indicate we've got a severe problem with these sandstone aquifers, and it's happening now, and within 15 to 25 years we could have some serious problems. And I want to emphasize this is really our best estimate of a time frame, but we're starting to get into kind of uncharted waters here. There's going to be things happening that we have not experienced before, or other people have not experienced before. For example, this sand that's starting to be pumped in some of these Joliet wells that they're telling us about. That wasn't something we anticipated a couple of years ago, and now it's starting to happen. So that may decrease the life of the aquifer, even though there may be water coming out. So alternative water sources need to be considered. There's several options. I'm going to go through them rather quickly. Shallow groundwater. There are some aquifers much shallower. There's sand and gravel aquifers laid down by the glaciers, and then below that is some shallower bedrock units. And this map shows both of these. The circles represent water that's already being pumped from these particular aquifers. So the blue represents these sand and gravel aquifers, and you can see Will County didn't win out on the glacial deposits. Okay, there's some good deposits up here in McHenry and Lake and Kane County, but the aquifers, or the glaciers, for whatever reason, didn't deposit a lot of sand down in Will County. So that's not really going to be an option for this area. There's also some shallower bedrock aquifers. They're mainly carbonate, so the dolomite. And they're already being used by many communities in Will County. Unfortunately, these units tend to kind of pinch out as you get into the Joliet region, so they're not going to be able to provide the amount of water that Joliet and the area and the industries would need. So shallow groundwater is not going to really solve problems in Will County. Lake Michigan allocation I mentioned. So as you may know, Illinois is limited on how much water we can take out of Lake Michigan because we send it away from the watershed down into the Illinois River. But there's actually water available now. 10 years ago, that wasn't the case. For various reasons, now we have water available. So that's an option. So this map actually shows the communities that are on Lake Michigan water and how the piping goes out to their communities. So there's a few problems for Joliet and other cities in Will County going after this water, first of all, it's going to be very expensive, maybe even prohibitively so. You'd have to you'd probably have to build some new lines because the lines out there don't have enough capacity probably for the water needed out here. You can see there's a playing field and a couple other areas that are close, but there's just not enough water in those pipes that could actually make a difference to Joliet. And then, of course, you lose control of your rates. You know, now you're paying Chicago for your water, which I think nobody wants to do, right? Then the third alternative is rivers, and that's probably the main source right now. So we all know the Des Plaines, big river runs right through the middle of town, the Des Plaines, but it's not really being considered because of water quality issues. So as you may know, much of the Des Plaines has got treated wastewater in it. And even though that's much cleaner than it was in the old days, it's still considered to be too expensive to have to clean up that water for drinking water standards. So at this point, the Kankakee River is the one that's preferred as the alternative source of water for Joliet. And my understanding is Joliet is looking into submitting a permit application to DNR. They haven't done it yet, but the point they want to withdraw from is down here along I-55. So obviously you've got to build the infrastructure to bring that water up. You have to build new treatment plants because treating surface water is much different from treating groundwater. It's much more difficult. It's much more variable in quality than groundwater is. You have to get it across the Des Plaines River. If you're bringing it up from here, you got to get it across the river at some point. So that's another cost that will have to be considered. And then there's a few other limitations. So rivers in Illinois have low flow limits. So during a drought, for example, you may not be able to withdraw the amount of water that you would like to. And then there could also be water quality issues. There was, for example, Aurora and Elgin are on Fox River water. This past summer, there was a compound, a naturally occurring compound that got into the water. No one really knows how. So it's a natural process, but it was a taste and odor issue, and they ended up having to shut down their intakes from the Fox River for a month and use groundwater at that point. So there's a lot of complications. I mean, they're not that they can't be overcome, but these are things that will have to be considered. So switching to river water, like I mentioned, you still have to rely on these sandstone aquifers as a backup source during periods of drought or when there's poor water quality conditions. So again, we need to manage these aquifers as best as possible, and again, we need to have a regional focus when we're doing this, because if we're doing the right thing here in Joliet, but if other communities are not, then it's really not going to make a big difference for Joliet. So I want to mention there are a few other options, and these might be a little pie in the sky at this point, but down the road they may actually be very important components in a water system. So water reuse, maybe you've heard of this. These new technologies, they're actually fairly mature technologies now, kind of membrane filtration or reusing wastewater. Most people can't get over the idea of drinking treated wastewater. But in certain parts of the world, they're starting to do that. You can also actually inject that back into the aquifer, so that helps kind of filter out some of the things that people might be concerned about, and then you can pump it back out. Again, it's a technical and scientific challenge to do something like that, but it's a possibility that could happen in the future. We could drill wells south of the fault zone. I mentioned, the fault zone seems to prevent water from moving from the south, but it's possible that we can drill wells there and pipe that up back into the northeastern Will County. That's probably not a long-term solution, though. The aquifer south of the fault zone has the same issues, long-term issues, as the aquifer north of the fault zone, even though there's very few users south of the fault zone. And then I mentioned there was this deep aquifer which has salty water. We could desalinate that, but my understanding is that the cost of that is prohibitive at this point. So, what can Will County do? So I have some suggestions. Begin the process as soon as possible, now if you can. Again, the Kankakee is probably the most likely alternative source at this point, but you should consider all these other possibilities, check into them. And I would recommend organizing a regional water planning group and use the Northwest Water Planning Alliance as your guide. They would be happy, I'm sure, to work with you. They represent the western and northwestern counties, so Kane, Kendall, and McHenry County, including, and you should definitely get the industries on board because they're obviously greatly affected by what's going on with the aquifer. And again, regional problems, so reach out to adjacent counties, especially Kendall and Kane, because what happens there is going to affect what happens here and vice versa. And then I'll just put a plug in for the water survey. Work with us to expand the monitoring and data analysis for these aquifers and maintain and use groundwater. And we also have surface water modelers as well to test various scenarios that you might want to look at. I'll just point out that we do have observation wells, many in the area, but in Will County we're kind of a little short, and we're trying to correct that by taking over some old wells and putting our equipment in there. It's going to be an expensive, labor-intensive process, but we really need the data, so we're working on that. And I'll just close with this idea of partnering between the survey and Will County. These are the kind of things that we can do: data collection, withdrawals, water levels, water quality as well, and then the analysis, putting together these models and looking at the different scenarios. And with that, I'm done. Thank you for your attention. Take any questions? Sure, Greg.
I understand with the Jardine plant and the South plant, you know, some of the upgrades to the systems on the line, the Oklahoma system, the public lift system, there is a little bit more capacity. However, a while back, when we were negotiating with Oklahoma for my previous role in Village of New Lenox, there was an option years ago that there was going to be a consortium, a water consortium that was going to come together. The county did not have any restrictions, and they were willing to guarantee, you know, X amount of millions of gallons, whatever it was. Is that an option, or could that be an option in the future? I know the pipeline would be an expensive route to start, but it would supply a tremendous amount of water to the area.
I'm sorry, where was that from?
The consortium, there was going to be a water consortium that would actually go through Hammond.
Yeah.
So pipeline, it would be just south of the main area, south of the county, and come through all northern Will and then through this area.
Right. So I'm not sure. I mean, Indiana obviously doesn't have the restrictions on Michigan water, but because that water is being transported out of the watershed, it might still apply. And probably the Lake Michigan Compact, which includes Canada, would probably get involved at that point, I would guess. So I don't know.
Mike?
On the map, you showed the possibility of going to Key River. Why would the Illinois River be an option? You wouldn't have to cross over.
Well, actually,
you wouldn't have to cross over to Des Plaines.
I think it's again a water quality issue because the Illinois at that point is mainly the Des Plaines River. So I think the idea was actually there's a dam somewhere along here, and the water at this point is actually part of the pool from that dam. So it's actually a mixture of Illinois River water, but the Kankakee River water quality is so much better. I think the idea was you want to go down here because of the quality issue. That's my understanding.
What if we set up a series of reservoirs? Is there, could we capture rainwater, set up some lakes or something in forest reserves? Would that be enough water to supply the area, or would that be just a drop in the bucket?
I think that would probably be a drop in the bucket. So that is often used as in certain riverside cities as a secondary source in case during like a drought or low flow conditions. But I doubt that we could capture enough water at the reservoir size unless we had a humongous reservoir. So Joliet uses, I believe, somewhere on the order of 20 to 25 million gallons of water a day. So I don't think the reservoir project. You're talking about like a side channel type thing, unless it was continuously filled, I guess.
Kind of expand on that. Two-part question here. Aquifers replenish. What's the quickest way to replenish an aquifer?
Well, so the problem with this aquifer is it's what's called confined. So we've got these layers above it that prevent water from the surface from getting back in there. So this is a very complicated question you're asking, but it's a good one. But so actually, part of the issue now is for many years, wells were drilled through both aquifers and they were connected. So that water was actually mixing in both aquifers. In recent years, they've gotten away from that. They've gone to the deeper aquifer, not open up to the upper aquifer. So that water is no longer going down into the deeper aquifer, which means the deeper aquifer is going drier faster. So really the only way to increase is by this kind of aquifer we call aquifer storage and recovery, where you're actually injecting water back into the aquifer. There's a lot of technical issues with doing something like that, but it can be done.
And then the second half of that question is, I mean, the earth is used as a filter, which is why the water quality lower is better, right? So anyway, kind of to Tom's point, but rather than pooling somewhere, we're waiting for Mother Nature to do its thing. What about taking water out of the rivers and using that as some kind of diversion into a system that would allow filtration and, you know, letting the earth help do some of that filtration work?
Right, so that kind of stuff is done in areas where the aquifers are pretty shallow, where you can like fill a basin and just let it kind of naturally seep down into the aquifers. The problem here is that
we have multiple levels.
We have multiple levels of aquifers, and they're several hundred feet down, and so that's not going to really work. We actually have to inject the water through a well, probably back in there. The problem again with using river water or wastewater is EPA would be involved at that point because we're injecting potentially.
You'd have to set up a filtration system that
You'd
once
have
the
to
water
connect the
hits
water.
that aquifer, it's clean, or a lot cleaner. But you would still have a filtration system coming out.
That's right. So then you'd pump it back out.
Right. So,
and it will go to your treatment plant anyway, so you're going to treat it.
right. So I guess seeing if there was some way to be able to set up a cycle that would kind of naturally use the earth as well as man-made activity. I don't know.
Yeah, so like I said, it's being done in other parts of the world, but our problem here is the deepness of these aquifers, so we can't really pass it
Probably
through.
there's a lot of money to figure this out.
Yes, we could.
You know, the other side of this question is, how do we take less out of the aquifer? And who's taking all the water out of the aquifer? And are they being efficient, or are they just being wasteful? So,
Yeah, I mean, at this point, though, as I showed in that one figure, even if you took Joliet completely off, it doesn't solve the problem. It helps, but
no one thing seems to solve the problem. No, it's your presentation. It's going to be a series of different actions that potentially will start to solve the problem. And so what we take out is part of the problem.
right.
So I just thought I would. And I don't know exactly, I know you mentioned Joliet, or at least for Will County, it's probably the biggest extractor from the aquifer, but I'm sure they're not the only one coming out of the aquifer. So it's really those communities, I think they can start by saying, how do we use less of this resource, or you'll be getting sand out of your water.
And just even communities that are communicating with each other about where they're putting wells, what their plans are.
Yeah. And not only is it on the, we think of residential use, but there's a large industrial use, some industries of our water. So,
and that's a concern to us.
Yeah.
They don't have a reliable source of water.
it's just not residential. Mr. Bell?
Yeah, in unincorporated Homer Township, there's a Whispering Pines well south of Farrell by 151st Street, and they were supplied by a vein of water from Lake Superior, and I don't see any discussion on veins of water coming in from other.
That's not correct. There is no vein of water from Lake Superior down there.
That's what they were telling us, because our water was, I lived there for a while, and you drink right out of the faucet, there's no rust anywhere in your appliances, and they said it was Lake Superior water, and that's why.
No,
So that's wrong.
That's wrong.
Okay, just had to ask. Hey, they lied to us, what did you say?
Corporations are always honest, Steve. I just wanted to kind of dig on it. I was going to ask the question, and I think Jim pretty much said it kind of well. What can we do? And I spent a lot of time in California the last couple of years, particularly in San Diego. And I mean, they've had huge water problems there. And for years, they've started with this message of using less water. I mean, literally asking on a sticker in the shower in the hotel room that you turn the water off while you're lathering up and then turn the water back on to wash off the soap. I mean, they are really pushing on the conservation. In fact, I believe you could get a fine if you were a restaurant owner and you gave someone a glass of water that they didn't ask for. I mean, it's really dire there. And I'm not saying that we're at that point here, but I haven't really seen any kind of, other than the alternate day watering in the summer for lawns, I haven't really seen any kind of a campaign at all in Illinois or anywhere in the Chicagoland area to conserve water. And
I would suggest you check out the Northwest Water Planning Alliance. They have developed, for example, a model ordinance for lawn watering, but they also have some education materials that they put out on conservation. So,
I'd also point out in California, more on the industrial side, they started to deplete their underground water pretty significantly.
yeah, it's bad there. It's really, really bad. And they don't even get their water from California anymore. They snatch it from some other state.
Comes out of Colorado, comes out
Yeah.
of the mountains. It's always
It's pretty bad.
We should never forget Southern California as a desert that they can just green
Right,
out.
right.
It's a natural desert.
No, it's a natural desert, but I mean,
We
we
have
might be a natural desert in a few more years, and so
That's right.
now's the time to
It'll be
start.
cold there, it'll be warm here.
Very possible, Jim.
Okay, is there any other, Chuck has another question.
Just one more
Oh,
question.
Dave's got it.
Is there any programs that you've seen where people have identified water sources by water use? And what I mean by that is, I mean, we have a need for cooling stations with our atomic plants and stuff in the area. And you know, that cooling doesn't really care from the water quality coming out of a river versus pulling it from the aquifers. So have we had any kind of discussions along those lines?
well, I mean, you do mention cooling systems. So power plants by far the biggest users of water in Illinois and probably the country. But that water just passed through a little bit lost evaporation, and it goes back into the river for the most part. What we don't actually know is what are the water quality needs of the industries. I mean, we haven't really gotten to that point yet. And they may not need the high quality of groundwater. They may, though. I don't know what their processes are. It depends on the industry, I suppose. But some of them probably do use displays of river water. I don't know. But that's something we need to have discussion with the industries as well. What they
That would
need.
be a good question to put out in the survey.
So I do have some handouts in case anyone's interested. These are just some fact sheets that kind of follow up, kind of more layman's term about what I just gave here. So
I guess
if you want any of
one other
those.
person has a question. Dave, do you have a question?
Just one question. We are aware of at least one other jurisdiction, water jurisdiction within the county that's seeking a permit to pull fresh water from Kankakee River, aside from Joliet, as you just alluded to. How does that process work? And is that, based in law, or is there can you just briefly touch on that? I just find it interesting. I'd like to know.
Yeah, I don't really know all the details. It goes to IDNR, and they have I forget the name of the actual section that actually goes through that. It's not the people I actually work with. But yeah, I think they look at water quality issues, they look at low flow issues and how much water is, and what's water being used for. But yeah, I don't know any details more than that. So.
All right.
Okay. Well, if there's no other questions, thank you very much. Okay, Lois, are you there? This is our grant support person. Just going to give us a brief report on where she's currently has been and where she's going.
Good morning. Did everyone receive a copy, either electronically or a hard copy of my report? If not, they're available. So just very briefly, everything, the first 5 are the grants that were submitted since I reported the last time. The reason I left the other ones on there were for the new board members to be able to see the work that has been done in the previous 6 months. So of the grants that we submitted, there were 3 federal, 1 state, and 1 private corporate grant. We did receive, just as a correction, on the private corporate grant, that's a multi-year grant, so they have committed every year $20,000 to our drug-free community grant application as the match. So unless there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Any questions for Lois? I do have one question, if there's no other questions. You know, we were talking Tuesday at the Capital Committee about the potential renovation of the old courthouse for non-court uses. And of course, a lot of upgrades would have to be done to that building, but a lot of it has to do with energy efficiencies and so forth. And I kind of brought this subject up of what might potentially be out there that would assist us in renovations for some of our older facilities, changing windows, changing HVAC systems, maybe more efficient elevators, so on and so forth, you know. And I know a lot of that still exists, both on the public and private side. So I guess it's just perhaps my request, you can take a look at what might be out there as we try to assess do a renovation, that there could be other resources that are potentially available.
Absolutely. Actually, ComEd is a good corporation. They created a private corporation that they're providing funding for things of that nature, so we can look at that as well. But I'll be glad to watch for that.
Yes, that'd be great.
Okay. Any other questions?
Any other questions for anyone? Okay, you must be doing a good job. You must be happy that I don't have no questions. Okay. Next we have the friendly freight mobility studies. IDOT funding. Nick, are you going to make comment on this?
I can very briefly. As all of you know, we're ongoing doing the community-friendly freight study. Working with a lot of folks, we were able to secure a $750,000 grant from IDOT. This, along with funding from JADA, the Will County Governmental League, CED, is paying for the study, which totals approximately $1.3 million. So out of that 1.3, 750,000 is coming from IDOT, who's very, very involved along with CMAP. The County Department of Transportation is the point on this project, but the money came through the County Executive's Office, so we're just administering the grant. Per the last Executive Committee, we were authorized to go ahead and sign the grants just so we could get the process started, because there's a number of signatures required, and we want the money to flow. But this is just a resolution to authorize that signing of the grant and the allocation to the RTA fund, which is where the funds are being paid out for this grant, the freight study. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Okay, any questions?
I thought it was $1 million, now it's 1.3.
I think with the workforce component, it pushed it up a little above $1 million.
300 is more than a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, we're not paying, the county is not paying for that. That also JADA had a grant previously for a TMA down there, and that's where this is all being part of the study. So I may be a little high, but I thought it was over $1 million. So
I thought it was a cat over million. I didn't see 1.3.
I'll check it.
We'll have to look. I mean, if you're including some JADA work or some grants that came from JADA, and that would push our. We're at basically.
I'll double check.
We're at basically $800,000, but we didn't include JADA.
Right. That's coming from
The last numbers I see was that JADA and grants and funding.
Right.
I didn't see anything there.
It's on a parallel track, but it helps with the study because they had an old, I believe it was an old IDOT grant that was supposed to fund a traffic management agency or association down there around the Elwood area. And that some of that money is being repurposed to assist with some of the work on this grant.
And that's great. I guess I can see that, because last number was 1, and we got 750, and we're getting 50, and we're on the hook for maybe 2 now.
The last number I see, I think it was a little over $1 million.
The county's major funding, and I'll defer to Bruce and Jeff.
We're pulling up the contract right now on the web,
but
the old resolution.
We're funding the project manager. That's the bulk of our cost, right? It's Ann Schneider's contract.
Well, that's separate.
Right, no, that's separate. That's separate from this. But the bulk of this study is being paid by other people. It's not being paid by Will County government, even though it's benefiting the Will County area.
The expense that we took on was the expense of the consultants. Ian Snyder, that was the expense we took to track.
And we have to finish negotiations on that?
No, we're extending that contract, so we have not completed it yet.
The agreement we have on our agenda is for $750,000. So that's one we're.
All we're asking you to approve today is the grant. The contract was approved for CDM Smith previously. So this is just to approve the grant. We always bring grants to the board for approval.
Why don't we move forward? We'll get some other information. Certainly, we're going to approve the grant. So I'll entertain a motion to accept the grant. That's $150,000. Next, we have the Illinois Prescription Drug overdose related deaths. I think we're going to do that also.
This is Nelson. This was heard at Public Health and Safety Committee. I'm not going to go through all the details, but just a high level. This is approval. Two things we're asking you to do. Approve the acceptance of this grant, which is $122,500. It's a program to be a 5-year grant at that level, so we'll get 5 years of $122,500 each year. Those funds are going to pay a portion of the project director's salary. We program this to be approximately 60% FTE for the grant. The other 40% or so, we're using existing county executive funds. And the reason we're doing that is we wanted a full-time position that could do other scope of work items that aren't in the grant. I mentioned at the committee, one of those things was, it's been brought up at the Judicial Committee before by the chairman. We do these JAG grants at the schools. We don't have a real good mechanism to chase those, so that's one of the duties among many others. Kathleen Burke is the person we're going to hire for this position. She's a former director, CEO of the Robert Crown Center, very, very educated in these issues. She's working for free basically for us now, doing activities, and we'd like to get her hired, so we're asking for you to not only approve acceptance of the grant, but also approve her hire based on grant funds and the executive's budget, knowing that, like all our grants, I'm going to anticipate Mr. Moose's question, that with grants, when the grants go away, the position goes away unless we can find the budget somewhere else. But it's probably a 5-year commitment right now for this grant program to do all heroin, opiate, and other addiction related issues. So I'll take any questions.
So this, I'm going to maybe just, I'm going to ask for some clarifications. So we're going to get a grant for $122,500. That's a 5-year grant. Each year we'll receive that amount. Out of that grant, we're going to hire a person to help coordinate or run the program. And on that employee, it's a 60-40 split, and that continues for 5 years. Is that?
That's our plan.
That's it, okay. I might also mention this was at Public Health and Aging, and they were very supportive of this. I pretty much concur. I'm very supportive of it. There's always the understanding it's a grant-funded position. If the grant ceases to exist, generally that position, then it goes away.
I just have a question.
So I want to make sure everybody has understanding. We're also approving the hire. So I just want everybody to understand that. Because it's a little different than the process we're trying to establish. But I have found in trying to establish this kind of system of how we hire or how we interact with the hiring is sometimes a little more difficult than I anticipated. So this goes outside of the norm. We would be also approving the hire of this person, so everyone understands. Yes, Suzanne?
No, I was just wondering the grant, I'm looking at this, and sorry if I didn't ask this before, if it was a state grant or federal grant? What
It's federal money that's coming to the state, so we have much less concern about the money actually coming because it is federal money that's coming.
Because we haven't had issues with it funneling through the state on any other grants?
No, they have to. It's actually all federal grants.
We're confident. And we're...
I love the program,
Yeah,
I just don't, I don't...
It's federal money that...
Okay.
Let's say about federal grants. All federal grants come from the state.
I know.
I mean, but the state can't hold them up. It was made clear some time back by the federal courts saying you had to move the money forward for the intended purposes. So I'm not overly
No, I think it's an
concerned about
incredible
that.
program, I just, I'm leery on the process, anything goes through the state right now.
Yeah, but no federal grants come directly.
Right, oh, I do know that, I didn't know, we've had something else, but...
Come on, anybody else know that, you know, there's really no benefit for them to hold them up.
Quick question. The grant's going to be paying $56,000 for hers, and if we do a 60-40 split, you said your office has the additional dollars already in their budget to pay her the other 40?
We're using, funds from vacant positions and things like that to pay for it. So we're going to have to budget for it going forward within our existing budget. Yeah, the other thing I didn't know is the grant is paying for her, for the positions, health care and benefits. That's not being borne by the county. So that's going to be all through the grant too.
100% of that, Nick? Okay, so when I'm looking at the list here for FICA and MIRF and all that stuff, the total amount of money that you figured that on her total salary,
right? Not
just on that 56. Is that what you're saying?
Okay. So the grant picks up all benefits.
Right.
Oh, that's good. Usually the opposite. Right. Yeah, great.
Ms. Burke would also be in charge of helping to facilitate the Safe Passage program that we've been working on for the last 8 months. I've had the honor of working with her. It's been a great program. I know it's going to roll out nicely, and I would support this 100%. I'd like to make the motion that we approve this.
This one, no, we don't have this one.
Okay, motion. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Every time I have to, I can't say this on occasion. Was it maybe 3 years ago, 4 years ago? We're in Washington, D.C., and we're in the Department of Justice, and we bring up this whole thing of heroin, and we were told that, oh no, this isn't a problem. It's only isolated in your community. They were off on that, weren't they? I like to throw out that we were a little ahead of the curve in trying to address opiate abuse, specifically heroin, because, and that's why you communicate. So we went up to Washington. I like to think after we left that meeting, somebody said, you know, maybe we should take a look at this. We always know trends or what's going on much before Washington, D.C. does. That's why we go out there and try to communicate to them what we see. Nick was in that meeting. You know what they told us, Nick?
Yeah, it was. We've heard that both at the Justice Department and the Office of National Drug Control Policy. I think that was even earlier, where they were more focused on the meth labs, which is a problem in lots of parts of the country. But Will County was ahead of the curve as far as the opiate things, because we started a Heroes Health program and these other education and prevention efforts before it's become the national issue that it has become. And the one, I mentioned this previously, is we had the deputy director of the National Office of Drug Control Policy come and speak in Will County because of that. And one last thing we mentioned, this grant, we're one of the lead agencies in the state with a number of other agencies, counties and other groups. All those groups are coming to speak at our forum this year to talk about what they're doing. So there is some lessons learned and experience shared in between the different counties and City of Chicago and other groups who are partnering together to see what's working and what isn't working. And there's a strong data component to this too. So we'll hopefully have some good data coming out of this that we can use for future action. So.
Just one more thing, Nick. So as we're taking a look at all the things that the grant's covering, I just want to make sure that we do a good accounting over each year, because it looks like we have quite a bit of dollars set aside for medical supplies and other professional services that might be able to help cover her salary from our budget as we go forward. I think this is a great program.
Those are for the materials like the naloxone and other things she's going to use in the training. So
Understood.
So those are
understood. So, but again, it's a budget. And if it doesn't get used, and when you talk about other professional services, I'm not sure what that entails. So I'm just saying, I just want to make sure that we're keeping a good accounting of it.
We'll be closely monitor and inspect on this because it's federal grant money.
Yeah.
They're pretty good about
Making sure that we dot our i's and cross our t's.
But generally, they want to see the results.
Right.
So I was just brought to my attention that we had a motion and a second on the IDOT $750,000 grant, but we didn't vote on it. So do I need to redo the motion second?
No, we didn't. We had a motion and a second.
Okay, well, I'm going to go back to the, who made the motion? Ray made the motion. Denise made the second. This is the $750,000 grant. The motion was made to accept that grant. So, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Okay. We didn't vote on this one either. Okay. Then I'll entertain a motion to on item number 4, the drug opioid overdose related deaths and the hiring under the grant. We had a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, we're all caught up now. Okay. Next, we have authorized intergovernmental agreements, indemnification agreement with the Bolingbrook for the 95th Street extension. I'm just going to briefly say this has to do with the stop sign that Bolingbrook put up on the county road. There's discussion of disagreement on jurisdiction. We're working through that. In the meantime, the state's attorney's office wanted indemnification of that sign by Bolingbrook, taking responsibility for the liability and taking some of that liability off the county. They've agreed to do that. Bill, is there anything else you want to say?
No, it's all to our benefit.
It's all to our benefit. So, I'll entertain a motion. We have a motion. Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. The next 4 resolutions all deal with the IGA for recycling collection events. We do this is pretty common. So, I'll entertain a motion on
Julia, move.
all those.
Second.
Okay, motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Then, item number 10, authorizing IGA with Naperville for household hazardous waste collection.
Did we just take all 4 of them at the same time?
We did, but those were other ones. That was for this collection of, these are for special waste. You gotta get your waste treatment or we get a motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have a warning bid for electronic collection.
So
Moved. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have a warning bid for farm lease for agricultural purposes.
So moved.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Discussion? Yes, go ahead.
So I have a question. I know at the Farm Bureau, the Farm Bureau, at Forest Preserve, we change when we do bid leases and stuff like that. So
for somebody leasing ag land and doing a bid from March to March is kind of a not a real good year for a farmer, you know? I mean, you get your, all your discounts and everything for anything you buy prior to year end, which would be December. You're asking people to bid in March on this, and it's a March to March. So it really ties everything up. So it's like, I would like to see us look more into what we do here at the county level, to go and look at what we do at the forest preserve level, to make the bidding process more in line with an actual farm harvest plant season.
Rita, and Jonathan,
I can answer that. Deal with the landfill. We do go out to bid in December, January. So this is the result of that bid. So it is a few months prior. The contract is a 3-year agreement, you know, and each year we renew it based on the size of what we can actually let them farm, because as you know, the landfill is taking up more and more footprint, so it may change to 53.3 this year, it might be 45 next year. So, but the lease is March to March, but the bid is always a few months before.
So, but they don't know they've got awarded the bid in December, right? So you don't know. What I'm saying is you make all your purchases for all your discounts for all your farm stuff before end of year. So if you're not putting it out to bid till December, that's really too late. As for the forest preserve, we put our bids out much earlier so that they can.
We can move it up.
Yeah, I think it should be moved up.
There's no reason why we couldn't move it up.
So that'll be for the
Yeah,
next.
we move it up October. Does that make more sense?
I think we should look at what's in line with forest preserve, because we're close to the farm bill. I think it's August or something.
August, okay.
September, I'm not sure what it is.
Whatever makes
I don't
sense.
remember.
Okay, so we'll look at the next farm.
Thank you.
So we have a motion, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Claim various equipment surplus and authorizing disposal. Moved.
Second.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Claim sheriff seized vehicles surplus and authorizing disposal.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Appointing county engineer, director of transportation. Move. Second.
That was slow.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Establishing salary, authorizing the county executive to execute a county engineer and director of transportation employment agreement with Jeffrey Robinson. Move. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Authorizing IGA.
Nick's got a question.
Oh, Nick,
Comment?
Can I just make a quick comment? Mr. Speaker Mooses, we had spoken about this with Jeff Ronaldson's appointment of county engineer. That creates a vacancy for his position. County rules, I assume most people are aware of this, allow for internal promotion just by a paper signature. So Jeff has appointed someone within his, interviewed and appointed somebody within his office to move up to the deputy position.
Yeah.
But for positions below that, that could create a stream of promotions within inside. So we had spoken about this, about posting those positions, but if they're internal, then they're going to be able to just follow the process that we've been following of promoting somebody within the office. If it's an external hire, then that would come to the board. We just wanted to make board members aware of that, because there could be several moves within the office of a career path for people who are lower level positions moving up to higher level positions. But our intent is to post those, and then if, like I said, if they're external, they would come to the board for formal approval. If they're internal, that's just a change of status form that Jeff would fill out. So just wanted board members to be aware of
And I
that.
have had that discussion with both Jeff and Nick. Does everyone understand, you know, that we'll post the positions, but if it's an internal, there's people who would apply for it internally, they just move through the system. And if we go to something outside, then it would come back to us. Here again, this gets all back to that free posting that we talked about as a committee. And this is one of those areas that, you know, be aware of, that we're going to post these positions. I anticipate many of them will be filled internally. But we are, everyone should understand, the positions are being posted.
They're going to be posted, there'll be interviews, and the best qualified candidate will be selected and will be that position. Just how the process is yet to be determined, whether it's internal or external. So we just wanted board members to be aware of
Does
this.
everybody understand that? Anyone has concerns? We're not going to make, there'll be no pre-posters from this request to this committee, but understand there'll be a poster. Okay? It's kind of like we know we're going to be short 8 engineers, so at some point, somebody will probably come from the outside. Unless there's somebody working in another department who's a civil engineer decides to come over to highway. I'll get those folks in my head. So, okay. Authorizing agreement base and the service provider for the building management project. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Authorizing for the Northeastern Illinois Area Agency on Aging Title III Older Americans and grant for.
Second.
What's up, sir? In case you're wondering. Okay. Replacement hires for the Division of Transportation. Moved. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Appointments for the oath proclamations, Herb, Chuck.
Yeah, we have a few here, and Mokina fireman, retirement. Sheriff Mike Kelly brought retirement of Father Vitas Mamanas. We have some engineer retiring. I think we were going to say something about that.
Well, I will just say, hey, we're going to say good riddance, pal.
So then they're going to be on the
Is
door.
that good enough, Bruce? We don't even know if you're going to show up.
That's right. I'll show you guys.
Yeah, I want to see what the outfit's going to be. What time will you wear that day?
And then a check from Waste Management. They're going to present a check for president. They want a present.
I'm not exactly sure what they're gonna bring, if they're gonna bring one of those giant checks or a poster, but basically, they're gonna provide $800-some thousand. So, yeah. So,
Only 800,000?
Yeah, for now. We just got 1.2 last week from the previous quarter, so.
Good question. Now, for the retirement, who's doing that one? For
Father,
yeah, who's doing
I
that?
Father Morales is my old master.
I was going to let Jim do it.
But he was the chaplain for the sheriff's department, even when he was our pastor at St. Anthony's. I never thought he was going to retire, actually, but someone else could. I'm not crazy always on bucket.
Well, hey, Herb.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
I might say a few words before Don.
I think why not both of you? There's no reason for you not to get up there.
I could walk down.
Yeah.
I don't need to, but I just want to.
Appropriate.
I come down and give my half hug, He's an interesting man, actually. So, okay. We've done appointments for the county. So we'll move on to proclamations. Move.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Appointments for the county executive. Move. Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. February 2017, appointments to boards and commissions. We just did that. Is there any other new business? Okay, we have a request for Tom Wyo did ask for a clarification from the state's attorney's office. Tom, you may explain it, because I do think it's something that, is this one of the cars parking in business?
Well, it's a person that set up a home occupation in his residential neighborhood. He was an electrical contractor, and he shut down his shop and brought all his equipment to his house, and built a building in his backyard, 30 by 60 foot building.
By permit?
He has all the proper permits.
Is this the email that I see in response to Kurt Payback?
Yes.
Well, you know, it seems like there's an explanation. I was going to say, basically, this is an enforcement that comes from land use. I don't know if we actually need an opinion from the state's attorney. It seems reading that email that they're following.
Well, I think there's a disagreement between me and land use to the interpretation of the ordinance.
So, well, I think this is even another issue of, you know, I could read it and I, you know, I don't want to be supportive of you, Tom, but what I read from land use is kind of a typical way of approaching this. I've seen it in the past, so I don't think this is out of character or this is being treated differently. Is there someone from land use here? Then we should frame these. Kurt's here. Kurt, why don't you come down or sit at a desk with a microphone or whatever. I think that the issue here, I'm going to try to frame the issue, Tom. The issue here is that there was somebody setting up a home business. For them to comply with putting up a new building, they had to eliminate old buildings. They had to convert some other space to living space, and they got guidance or advice on how to proceed from the land use department. They seem to have done that, and land use has given incrementally approval.
Well, that's not the question that I raised.
Your question whether they have the authority to do that?
No, whether they can have two commercial vehicles on this property. That was the question. Our ordinance says you can have one.
Okay, our ordinance, okay, then let me ask that.
You can have
You're very narrow to the vehicles.
Right.
Okay.
You can have a second vehicle in a building, but he had two vehicles.
And what ordinance are you referring to then, Tom? That's what I want to get to this. So what ordinance are you referring to?
Our zoning ordinance.
In our zoning ordinance, it makes reference to more than one commercial vehicle on a piece of private property or on the public right of way?
Private property.
Private property. All right. Kurt, you want to address that? I am going to ask the state's attorney also. But can you address that specifically on the and I also want things clear to define what parking on your property is. If it's in a garage, is that count, or is this things that are visible from the street? So maybe you can help with that, Kurt.
I sure will. Brian, can you be looking at the specific reference in the zoning code, particularly as it relates to the question of banner? This has been an issue that we have been discussing with Mr. Weigel about the proper interpretation of how many commercial vehicles can be on the driveway at any particular point in time. And our current interpretation is that there may be two. Mr. Weigel's interpretation of it is that there could be only one. Knowing of his interest in bringing resolution to this issue, we've been consulting with the state's attorney's office as well, because we have every desire to interpret it consistent with what our state's attorney's office believes is the intent of the county board in the language that currently exists. So we don't have complete resolution of that matter right now, but we are talking with the state's attorney's office, telling them how we are interpreting it in this instance, and we're sharing with them what we know of Mr. Weigel's interpretation of the matter, and we're looking for their clarification.
Phil? I mean, I don't know if you're aware of this one or not.
Matt Guzman, who works with land use, mentioned it to me a little bit. And I hope I'm with the right matter and not another one. I think the issue is whether one of the vehicles is in an enclosure or not makes a difference.
That's correct.
And our interpretation is a fence around property and constitutes an enclosure, and it's enclosed based on that. But I don't have the ordinance in front of me, but that is what Mr. Guzman's interpretation was that he mentioned to me.
Okay, well, Phil, then we'll officially ask for clarification.
That's fine.
Okay, on this matter, you work for Mr. Wago and the land use department, and it seems like it's not going to be an over complex issue.
No.
So if you can bring it back to us, to this committee, say at our next meeting, which would be the first Thursday of March.
All right, we'll do it.
Jim, there's a resident here who maybe would like to make a comment on it.
Sure.
We'll let that cover public comment.
That's obviously your call, Mr. Chairman, and I know you always want to listen to citizens on all matters. I will simply share with you that this is a very contentious issue. There are multiple issues involved that the department has been addressing through consultation with the neighbor who has a variety of concerns. He's been to our office. We've met with him on an hour and a half. We've had probably, in my opinion, an inordinate amount of involvement in trying to work through this issue. It's multi-layered. He has definite opinions on the subject for which he is thoroughly entitled. But I'm just sharing with you, and I communicated with you, Mr. Chairman, on some other set of issues involved here. We believe, that we are, as we always do, trying to enforce the ordinance in an impartial, thorough, complete manner, and believe we have done so. But I think you will find that he feels that we have actually, as he's indicated in writing on multiple occasions, that we are prejudiced in this matter, that we are working aggressively to protect the interests of one property owner versus another. And I just simply want to assure you, I think you know our reputation on this matter. Yeah. We don't care one way or the other about one person's interest versus another. We want equal protection under the law.
These types of businesses, when they're run out of homes, are always going to be very contentious with the neighbors. I, in my opinion, know what kind of business is, what the intent is of home business. This isn't necessarily one of them. I understand probably his position. I have to be sympathetic, but if we need to clarify the ordinance going forward, maybe we should do that. But it certainly, even changing the ordinance going forward doesn't affect this. So anybody can come down and speak under public comments, and if when we get there, the person can come down. Well,
sir, can you pull off until we call public comments? We just have a seat.
When we get to public comments, you can make it here. Okay, so, next we have committee reports, land use, Tom.
We've got one item on the agenda, is the extension of the special use permit.
Okay, any questions, Tom? Good finance?
A couple items, we're appropriating grant funds from the coroner's budget, increasing appropriations in the sheriff's budget for the 911 reallocation grant, increasing appropriations OTA capital budget, transferring and increasing appropriations in various county budgets for year-end shortfalls, and authorizing county executive to execute necessary documents for tax management programs.
Okay, any questions, Mr. Goodall? Okay, public works,
We have a resolution to lower the weight limit on Shannon Upper Road. We also have a resolution for additional design engineering services on the 95th Street extension.
any questions, Mr. Goodall? Judicial, benefits? Before you go, can you check it on the weeds?
I'll put your hand, that's cool. Are we talking about judicial? Nothing to report.
Okay. Public health and safety?
I have 11 different IGAs between the Will County Animal Control Services and 11 different municipalities. All straightforward, real easy, and that's it.
Okay, any questions? Capital?
Nothing to report.
Or legislative, legislative? Okay, there. I tried.
How do you forget
Some-
this one?
Oh, I don't forget. I tried.
Every single time you forget.
Yes.
We have our state and federal priorities agenda that is going to be coming in for approval on Tuesday, and then we'll put it up, we'll need to put room for Thursday.
We'll save space for, you're making a motion to save space
Make
for
a
the
motion to save
state
space.
legislative priorities
Yes.
and federal priorities.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion
Hope
carries.
everyone can make it, it'll be a good meeting.
Okay.
It's all.
Any questions?
I don't know if it, do we have the results of the HR 278 vote that I understand? is
Oh,
gonna take place?
yes. So it passed on a partisan level. It's not going to, I mean, it will come out onto the floor, they're not even sure about calling it. All has to kind of go under that same umbrella for budget. So right now the governor is not in favor of this bill. And so they kind of put a book on it for the Republicans.
Okay. Any other questions for Ms. Hart? Okay. Capital improvements?
Nothing to report.
Any questions? Yeah. Okay, executive, we just went over like executive, all those things. Any questions for me? Okay, is there, I have no, so I'll entertain a motion to set the county board agenda as amended.
So moved.
Move second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. There is, okay, then we'll get to public comment. Any public comment today? Sir? We'll try to keep our public comment for about 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and county board members. My name is Phil Adair. I live in New Lenox, and Mr. Paddock was up here earlier speaking to this case that my next door neighbor had built an industrial building, moved his operation out of an industrial park and popped it right next door to me. And it naturally has caused a concern with me and also with my neighbors. So this isn't just a single issue, and Mr. Paddock sort of frames it that way, but as I surveyed my neighbors, that's not true. So we're speaking here, Mr. Weigel brought up the case about vehicles on the property. Now, this gentleman has multiple vehicles, and I have pictures of documentation that there's more than 2. In fact, this one shows 3, and the other week there was 4 that were parked on the property. If you like for evidence, pass it around. So, the issue, and as the gentleman from the state's attorney brought up about the enclosure of a truck, so on and so forth, as you can see, the fence is removed. That property is not enclosed. So on that issue, I take what the land use department says. Now, Mr. Muses, you had somehow brought up and started to talk about my problem with what has been built next door to me. So evidently you have some correspondence that I had sent to Mr. Weigel and he passed along to you. And I think it's, I'm not sure which one you have, but I have the latest that I replied to Mr. Weigel and he passed on to Mr. Paddock. I'd like to have that passed along. And so I take issue, as you started talking about the instance of allowing some flexibility, so on and so forth, with accessory buildings. To me, this is wrong, and I state in my letter that this process of construction taking place started last year, and that this gentleman got one permit to make the change in the attached garage into some kind of office or rec room or whatever. As I live next door to him, he initially told me it was going to be an office, but whatever. So then he gets a big 40-foot container on the property. It causes a big eyesore to the property. He had hazardous materials out there. I got with Mr. Weigel, got with the county, Mr. Paddock and his department came out and got the gentleman to remove the material, and they found out that the container was over the property line, and they got the owner to move that container, but it didn't move it off the property, put it in the front yard. So all summer we had a 40-foot container that was an eyesore in the front yard. Now, I don't think anybody would like to see something like that. And yes, Mr. Paddock mentions it's contentious. It is contentious because if you look at this building should not have been allowed to be on the premises because even though it's zoned commercial and it skirts the issues as to, here's a picture of how the property looked before construction started. So what happened was construction started on the garage, this 60 by 30-foot building, 30 feet high, had a shed in the back of it. It wasn't removed. He had proper time to remove that shed. It wasn't done. He did nothing, not one bit, on the accessory building, the attached garage, and now the county is saying he could go on with this, and they issued him a demolition permit now, I understand, for the shed in the back. But when all this is completed still, he's in violation right now over the accessory limits of 1,800 square feet on a property. And I am really opposed to any continuation on this because the owner had proper time to take care of the attached garage and the shed in the back before this building was built. So you can understand my frustration living next door to this eyesore because there is not one person in this room who would want that next door to him, not one. I've asked everybody in the land use department, they refused to answer. The comment was, live with it or move. Live with it or move. If you go to the land use department and look on their webpage and look at their mission statement is to protect the community. Well, I don't believe this has happened here. So, yeah, is it probably all within the legal limits? Yeah, but where's the discretion by the department to prevent something like this to happen in a neighborhood?
Sorry, I didn't ask, but would you state your name?
Oh, I did? Okay. My name is Phil Adair, A-D-A-I-R.
You know, sir, I think we have to adjust to your comments. So now let me say that, you know, I said earlier, here's the question I would have. I mentioned earlier how I think we define home businesses. Run an industrial kind of operation is not a home business. So I understand your concern.
Thank you.
So the question is whether this is even a qualifying home business. I'm looking at it and saying, well, you have to show me that it's actually a qualified home type business. It's not meant to, I don't think our ordinance, the intent of our ordinance is for somebody to run a contracting business and storing and bringing their whole operation to that home. It's not like saying, well, I'm going to run my office out of my home for a business. It's not to me to become a construction yard not that large utility, building for utility use. So I'm probably, I understand exactly what you're saying. I want to see whether this even qualifies as a home business. I'll start from the very beginning. How does this qualify as a home business? I guess I'm asking the question, Kurt. You can bring it to me later.
Okay.
I'm just saying that I don't think this type of business being run out of a home was ever the county's intent. Now, I've dealt with this over the years, it always seems that it does fall on the person who's being most disruptive gets the most consideration. I don't think this is the intent to qualify for a home business.
Well, Mr. Musis, excuse me,
I don't
I'm
really
sorry.
want to use the comment. I'm just saying we should look at it. Phil, I would say let's look at the whole section on what's a home business. I think our intent was you could run, an accounting thing out of your home. You could run basically clerical type, or you could maybe have a beautician station down in your basement. You could cut hair, but it wasn't for this more construction type businesses. The other areas where we've had these issues have been with landscaping operations, where it's sometimes pretty contentious. So I'd like to start from the beginning, personally. Todd, I think that, have you addressed that, whether it's even qualified?
No, I didn't ask that question.
Well, I think we should. So let's take a look at it. I think that our intent for home-based businesses is pretty restrictive.
Well, I'll take that back. They told me it did qualify as a home.
Well, let's take a look at it. Have to be really, I'd be one that have to be really convinced that this type of business is going to be run out of residential is appropriate. But we'll do that. You have my question. I also would like the state's attorney to maybe take a look at that, and I'm going to take a look at it too. So,
are we asking the state's attorney for a written opinion?
No, just take a look at it.
Okay, I just want to make sure as we get into our system here.
Just kind of see, because to me, I just don't think that we wrote an ordinance that's that open to interpretation.
It needs to be revised.
If it is, we'll revise it, absolutely. So I think we'll take a look at it and see whether, clarify what we think the intent of all businesses are. I will tell you that when we fought vigorously against anti-gun folks running a home business and opposed it, and these were folks that were basically dealing in buying some antique weapons. We felt that was a big deal, but we don't think this is a big deal.
Judaism.
And I don't know what the zoning of this property is, but if I assume it's residential, it's not like it's, we've had issues in E1 and E2, and we've also even had issues in industrial commercial areas, what we were going to allow. Quite frankly, I can recall something similar to this that we wouldn't even allow in a commercial zoning. We said it had to be an industrial zoning. So, I think this would have to be a pretty broad interpretation. And it all had to do with these storage containers, storage of equipment, that it didn't fall under C2. They either had to be C3 or, I1 or I2, whatever it may have been. It was a number of years ago. So that's what even, and it was very specifically, by the way, to the state industry. I think we need to probably revisit that. Judy, did you have something?
Yeah, I did. I was wondering, so when will we hear back from Phil on that so that we
Well, I
can
think our
get
next,
feedback?
I think our next meeting,
Next meeting?
I think our next meeting, and, you know,
Just
until
want to
that,
clarify.
until then, I would actually ask to take no further actions that would let this go forward until we get a better clarification, so.
We will cooperate with the state's attorney's office to give you the analysis about whether this current use conforms or does not conform to the definition of home occupation business. I just wanted to point out that although there's obviously a very close linkage between these two subjects, even if it was not regarded as a appropriate home business, didn't qualify, a residential property owner is able to construct an accessory building at their facility. And there are in the ordinance specific limitations about the size and dimensions of that accessory building. So I just simply want to point out that the presence of that accessory building and its dimensions is in a sense, a separate issue from the underlying issue of can he operate a home occupation of this type at that location. I just want to make that clarification.
Okay. Any other, sir? We're gonna take a look.
Mr. Mucis, I would just like to rebut a little bit to Mr. Paddock's.
Give us a chance to take it. Okay. It doesn't serve any real purpose.
Well, you know, he left it hanging there, and I don't think it should be applied to, but that's okay. But I will say that I am working with Mr. Weigel on ideas and improvements in the ordinances so that this eyesore does not happen to anybody else. And if you'd like to come down and see this property, I invite one and all to see what's happening. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay. We are going to have a need for executive session for band purchases and labor negotiations. Are those two reasons? Motion. Second. Take the roll, please.